Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Better news for thousands of people forced from their homes by wildfires in BC. Evacuation orders are lifting in West Kelowna and Lake Country. Cooler weather is helping, but thousands of people in the Shuswap area still cannot go home. We're going to check in with colleagues in Kamloops and Kelowna and bring you the latest from the Prime Minister's visit to wildfire zones. Plus, what is the impact of wildfires on pets and animals? Plus, we'll take your calls. I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott this week. Welcome to BC Today. All evacuation orders from the Upper Park Rill Creek wildfire northeast of Kamloops were downgraded to evacuation alerts Thursday evening, and that's affecting about 96 properties. Still, it's been a brutally long week for tens of thousands of people across this province, ripped from their homes by wildfires across the province. Today, some better news. All remaining evacuation orders in the city of Kelowna and more in West Kelowna and Lake Country have been lifted, allowing some residents to begin returning home. Travel restrictions have also been lifted in West Kelowna. That being said, at least 181 properties there have been damaged. At all evacuation, as we said, all the evacuation orders from the Upper Rill Creek fire northeast of Kamloops were downgraded last night, affecting about 96 properties. 11,000 people, though, in the Shuswap area still don't know when they can return home because of the Bush Creek East wildfire. And temperatures are expected to rise this weekend, which could mean more wildfire activity. Amid all this, the Prime Minister is visiting the Okanagan, meeting with fire officials and First Nations leaders. We're going to get to some of his comments in a few minutes, but we want to hear from you. How are you doing after this long week? How have the fires affected you? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, our number is 604-669-3733. Pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email BC Today at cbc.ca. Jennifer Schrumpke is a reporter and producer and anchor at CBC Kamloops. She does a lot of jobs, and she and the team there have been at the center of our coverage for weeks now. Jennifer, thank you for joining us after an incredibly difficult and long week. First of all, what is the latest from officials there?
Hi, Dan. So officials in the Kamloops area, the fire that is still getting the most attention on our region, of course, is the Bush Creek East fire in the North Shuswap. So it is still mapped at that 41,000 hectares or 410 square kilometers in size. It is still burning out of control. We know that there are about 100 firefighters on the ground there today, and they were expecting 100 firefighters to come from Mexico today to help with that fire. There are lots of spot fires still burning up in the hills above the North Shuswap. It's smoky in the area, but thankfully the smoke is not as thick today. It's not that thick brown smoke that we were seeing on Monday, Tuesday. In terms of the highway, some other news that came from officials today was that Highway 1 is open. You'll remember that was the site of tension earlier this week when a group that called themselves Convoy of Truth and Freedom. Mm-hmm. They tried to dismantle that roadblock near Sorrento. Well, right now, people are getting through in both directions on Highway 1 between the village of Chase and Sorrento. So that's good news from officials. We don't know when the roads getting into the North Shuswap are going to open. That's still barricaded. So no timeline on that Squilax-Anglemont Road. We were hearing this morning that it's very dangerous to drive. There's still trees down, power lines draping across the road there.
Huge amount of cleanup still left to do.
Yeah.
Jennifer, give us a sense of this week. As we said, you've been on the front lines with our colleagues in Kamloops, talking with people. Very hard week for a lot of people. What's the mood there?
It is. It's tough. It's very emotionally draining. I would say people are exhausted. One of the most difficult stories, heartbreaking stories we heard this week was from the chief of the Little Shuswap Lake Band, Cookby James Toma, and his brother Barney. Several homes just in their family burnt down because of the Bush Creek East wildfire. So that was in Squilax to Secwepemcúlecw, or formerly known as the Little Shuswap Lake Band. Yeah. So just hearing those brothers talk about the devastation to their community was very difficult. There's going to be an update from elders and from the Cookby at 1 o'clock today. So we'll know more about how that area was impacted by the fires. Certainly that was hard. I would say, earlier in the week, we were hearing a lot about the tension on the North Shuswap amongst property owners who decided to defy the evacuation order and stay. And that has changed. Now we're hearing more messages of working together and cooperation. Those messages are a little louder, and that's just been wonderful to hear. And we heard this morning on our program, Daybreak Kamloops, the BC Wildfire Service is actually right now doing training on the ground in the North Shuswap with some of the locals. So about 25 people are doing that training today. Dan, you mentioned, the cooler weather. That's definitely helped people's moods. I was noticing on social media people doing the rain dance, who were around the Shuswap. Great to see that. Of course, people are celebrating the highway being opened. But there's just still so much unknown. And so, for example, we were just speaking with the school district in the North Shuswap. There's an elementary school in Solista. It's still standing. There's no power. And families don't know, school's obviously not going to be happening at that school, but they're looking for another building. So just, a real sense of it's been a challenging week, and people, I don't think they've had a chance really to look beyond the moment of what's happening right now.
And sometimes those feelings and emotions, when you're in that moment, you put them aside and kind of go on autopilot and get through the crisis, and then it can hit later. And certainly we know it, and for everybody and for colleagues here as well, and for you on the front lines there, what is next for people up there, if you have a sense of it?
Well, power is expected to be starting to come back on. I'm monitoring BC Hydro, and some power was restored to Scotch Creek. So, right now, I think there's about 3,000 properties along the North Shuswap that are without power. What's next? There are still fires burning up there, right? That fire is huge. There's spot fires on people's properties. So I think really what's next, what people are anxiously waiting for, is for the regional district to tell them how much damage was done. Is their cabin still standing? Are their neighbors' cabins still standing? Officials are right now categorizing every single property. I think they've done about 500 now already. They're determining whether it's a total loss, whether it's partially damaged, whether it's all clear. We heard that some officials couldn't even get into some of the areas, get their equipment in on the North Shuswap because there were active fires and downed trees. So people are anxiously awaiting that news. We're hoping the Columbia Shuswap Regional District will have some answers later this afternoon. There's a lot of people in the North Shuswap who are in communities that are not even on evacuation alert. So in Anglemont, St. Ives, Seymour Arm, and they're waiting for supplies to come to them. We heard that a barge was delivered yesterday afternoon with critical supplies, food, water, fuel. We heard from the regional district another barge is coming today. The last piece I'll say about sort of what's next, it was a bit sobering this morning on our program Daybreak Kamloops. We heard from wildfire expert Mike Flanagan. He works at Thompson Rivers University, talking about how there are still about 150 active fires burning in the province, and that, with so many and this heat and this dry weather, that all we need is a wind event, and some of those fires could come alive. So the message, obviously from him is we need to remain vigilant.
Jennifer Schrumpke, reporter and producer and anchor at CBC Kamloops, we so appreciate you giving us a perspective. We really hope that things are calmer this weekend. We're going to get an update from our weather specialist, Darius Madavi. Jennifer, incredible work, you and the entire team. A real credit to the craft and to everybody. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
Jennifer Schrumpke joining us live from CBC in Kamloops. As we mentioned, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in BC, meeting with fire chiefs and First Nations leaders in the Okanagan today. Here's some of what he said earlier today.
This has been an extraordinarily difficult summer for so many Canadians from coast to coast to coast, as communities have been hit with wildfires, with extreme weather events, on top of all the other economic challenges people are facing. And the one thing that we've been able to see everywhere across the country is communities stepping up to be there for each other, neighbors helping neighbors, people welcoming their fellow Canadians coming in from far-off communities, fleeing for their lives, having lost everything. It is an extraordinary credit to all Canadians how people have pulled together in the most difficult and terrifying times. I'm here in Kelowna today to be able to thank so many of the firefighters who've been on the front lines here over the past while, but even as I'm in Kelowna, I know places across BC are continuing to fight and struggle with forest fires. We are going to continue to be there as a federal government in supporting whether it's with the Canadian Armed Forces, whether it's with federal supports to the provincial resources. This is all about everyone coming together to be there for each other. That's what we're seeing from individuals. That's what we're seeing from orders of government. That's what we're going to continue to focus on even as we move forward and rebuild and learn from the experiences here and prepare for challenges into the future as well. People are scared. And there's lots of reasons to be scared as we see fires approach, as we see homes under threat, as we communities impacted. What we're seeing across the country is first responders stepping up in incredible ways. And I really would emphasize that anything residents and communities can do to facilitate the work that firefighters are doing as they're trying to get in and protect communities, protect homes, is really, really important. We need to make sure we're allowing our first responders to do the jobs they have of keeping the rest of us safe. I think there's a lot of reflections on how we shift and how we empower people to better respond in the future, to make sure that our firefighters are able to do their jobs in the best possible way. I think there's a lot to learn from the seamless and extraordinary cooperation and collaboration that happened here across West Kelowna, Kelowna, and Lake Country and the regional municipalities to make sure that everything was being done and that resources were sent to the right places. There's a lot of local knowledge that we need to make sure is at the center of everything we do. But yes, we're there for having discussions about the best ways to make sure that we're protecting citizens and communities into what will be a future with more and more extreme weather events for all of us. We are facing a changing world right now, changing climate. We're seeing more and more intense weather events. Insurance is going to get more difficult for people to obtain, even for those who can obtain it. And we know that that falls on all of us to be there for to help communities and individuals who've lost everything, who are having to rebuild. We need to take lessons in how to rebuild safely. I mean, we've seen the difference between neighborhoods that were built with fire safety in mind and neighborhoods that were built before that was really something we're thinking about. I've had a number of conversations about the need for better forest management. There are a lot of things that we need to do to be thoughtful and careful as we rebuild. I think people understand that we're in different situations now, and we're going to have to be really thoughtful and careful about how we work together. But the one thing I can say is we are going to be there for each other.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau earlier today speaking with fire officials and First Nations leaders in the Okanagan and touring parts of wildfire-ravaged regions. We know how important the weather is in all of this. Jennifer Schrumpke hinted at that. There's heat on the way for so many of us in the province. Again, let's find out what all this means with Darius Madavi, hardworking CBC News and climate specialist. Thanks so much for coming on the show again. What are we looking for the weekend?
As you said, temperatures are going to come up, which is the biggest concern. And with that is going to come dry conditions. So we have a ridge of high pressure, and I think by now people know that means high temperatures, dry conditions. We might see a shower sneak into the Kootenays tonight, but it'll be very brief, less than 5 millimeters of rain at most if it does materialize. And I'd say the biggest thing to keep an eye out for, because we know that we're going to have these hot, dry conditions, will be the winds. And a bit of good news there. It does seem like they're going to be fairly settled at 20 kilometers per hour or less through most of the southern interior. Today, we can expect winds of 20 kilometers per hour sustained, gusting to 40, which is not in Kelowna, which is not ideal, but also not the disastrous conditions that we were seeing this time last week by any means. So definitely, sort of cautiously optimistic that this won't be too bad of a weekend in terms of the fire danger.
Okay, so we've touched on Kelowna, and we were talking about Shuswap as well. What about wildfires in and around Lytton? We know those have been a concern. Do you have anything on the radar on there?
No precipitation. Humidity is coming down, but we are seeing that the winds are staying fairly settled. So the other day when we had that major spread, that was because winds really picked up for a while. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen again. Winds are staying fairly settled. Again, less than 20 kilometers per hour forecasted for the next couple days. There are a few times when they might pick up a little bit, just a couple errant gusts, but for the most part, I'm seeing they're actually coming down in speed over the next 24, 48 hours or so.
Before we get to rain, and I want to touch on that, can we talk about smoke? We noticed that it has returned to parts of the South Coast. How widespread is it? How long is it going to last?
It seems like it's covering most of the South Coast, at least in some capacity. Some places are definitely seeing more smoke than others, just because of the way that the winds are blowing. Heading into the weekend, it's going to be quite a smoky one through the entire southern half of the province. For places like Kelowna and Lytton and Kamloops, we're seeing the high pressure system just causing that air to settle, leaving that smoke for the most part in place and close to the ground in some of these places. Whatever smoke does get higher up into the atmosphere is being carried our way. So these sort of outflow winds pulling it over the ocean, but it'll sit over places like Vancouver and Victoria, Squamish, Whistler for a while before it does make it all the way out. At the moment, the forecasts are saying that Sunday morning is going to be our smokiest point. It's going to be quite bad. So if you wake up Sunday morning and it looks like the apocalypse outside in Vancouver, it should pass by the early to late afternoon.
And we've certainly seen that before, though we have to stress we are not right nearby here in Metro Vancouver, any wildfires, thankfully. And just to clarify, we do have an air quality advisory for the region. Is that correct?
We do, yes. Actually, if you take a look at the map of all the watches and warnings, most of the province is blanketed in these air quality advisories.
Fair point.
It's just the sheer amount of smoke means that pretty much everywhere is seeing it in some capacity. Right now, our air quality rating is 7, which is high, but the lower end of high. By this afternoon, it's going to come down to a 6, which is moderate, but the high end of moderate. So we're looking at conditions that mean that you should try and stay indoors with filtered air if you can.
Right.
But going outside is not going to be the biggest danger.
Got it. But again, we hear those warnings for those who have breathing problems, immunocompromised, perhaps a bit older or younger. Limit your outdoor and especially strenuous activities.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I should have mentioned that.
No, that's okay.
Yes, do what you need to do to keep yourself safe, because the air quality advisories very much, the concern that you should have very much depends on your own situation and your own, even just your comfort level with being outside. So don't feel obligated to go to the PNE this weekend if you don't want to.
Even though they would love to see you, love to have you. You don't have to run around, but maybe don't jog there. That might be the advice we would have. Let's talk about rain. When might we see it across the province for those who are near to the wildfires and here in Metro Vancouver?
Yes, so we get the chance of rain first, and then it moves through the interior. So we have that ridge of high pressure currently over the interior. It's staying in place for quite a while, but by early Monday, it'll start shifting into Alberta, which sort of allows this low pressure to move into the coast first.
Right.
So we get some cooler weather on Monday, some unsettled conditions, and then by Tuesday, that moves into the interior. So places like Lytton, Kelowna, Kamloops, the Kootenays, even by Tuesday and Wednesday, they should be getting some good rainfall. Here in Vancouver, it probably won't be until Monday overnight anyway, but we should see some rain by then as well. And then that should hold for the interior into Wednesday night, and on the coast, possibly even into Thursday. And we're talking a decent amount of rainfall. It's not that sort of pulse that we saw this week. It should be fairly sustained over those couple days, provided nothing major changes in these sort of atmospheric conditions. But for now, it does seem very likely that pretty much most of the southern interior will see at least some rain.
When you say decent amount, how much are we talking?
This is where we get. This is where
We
you're
ask you
putting
to
me in a
crystal ball
difficult
these things.
position.
Yeah.
I would say most places will see at least a few millimeters.
Okay.
I'm going to say
We're not holding to this to you.
Thank
We're not
you.
holding you legally to this. Thankfully, we just hope we're holding out for some hope.
some hope.
Yeah.
Yes, I just don't want to get hopes too high, but I
Fair
would
point.
say it's reasonable to expect 5 millimeters in most places, which
Mm-hmm.
is good news, especially because in a lot of these places where we're seeing these fires, they're typically very dry. So any amount of rain is good news.
Fair enough. We ask you to peek and using all that science knowledge and factual material and sort of look into the future. We remember last year, it was warm throughout much of October. How much of an outlier was that, or can we expect that may happen again this year?
Yes. So last fall, we had, as you said, warm conditions well into the fall. We had an unprecedented drought situation through the fall, and that really carried over into this year, which is why we're seeing so much of the province in dark red when we look at a drought map. And so those conditions, unfortunately, might be set to repeat this year. So Environment Canada releases a sort of a probability model for the next few months, which is very far out, but they're sort of looking at what are the odds it's going to be warmer than usual.
Fair enough.
And for most of the coast and into for the coast, it's around 70 to 80% chance we're going to be warmer than usual. For the interior, 60 to 70% chance. So pretty high, to be honest. It seems very likely that we're going to have a warm fall, which could carry through the drought conditions into this fall once again, setting up for another drought situation next year. That's very far in advance to talk about, but just so we're all aware of what could be possible.
Yeah, we
the
have to
drought-
deal with reality.
Yes, the drought is likely to carry through. They also release a precipitation forecast, and they're on the website. You can see sort of, and they also show
Which website, sorry?
the Environment Canada website.
Got it.
So weather.gc.ca, or you can Google weather probabilistic forecast, and you can just sort of look at. They release them every month. What the likelihood is of seeing cooler or warmer temperatures over the next few months, probability of seeing less or more precipitation we usually do over the next few months. And so the precipitation forecast for the south coast and over into the most southern part of the southern interior, it looks like it's most likely that we're going to have dry conditions, but this is only a 50%. So it's not by any means as likely as the temperature forecast.
There is a lot to consider, and Darius, you break it down so well for us. We really appreciate your time and your expertise, and we'll be able to see you tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6 o'clock and at 11 o'clock, and also on CBC News Network. So he's everywhere, folks, and he knows what he's talking about. Darius Madavi, CBC News and Climate Science Specialist. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
While West Kelowna crews are still fighting out of control wildfires, some people are returning to areas that have been declared safe. This morning, Jason Brolin, West Kelowna's fire chief, spoke with us about how his teams have been doing.
It's been a whirlwind. I don't think that myself or my firefighters have had a chance to process really the scope of this, what's happened to us. I just think that every time I drive through the neighborhoods or fly over top of them, I can't believe it. I'm sickened by the loss. One house hits us hard. But I'm also amazed by what was saved and, what the firefighters did. The properties that they protected is just, it just every time I see it, it boggles my mind. So it's going to take us all some time to work through it. We're still actively fighting fire on the ground. We're suppressing hotspots in neighborhoods. We're protecting homes. Last night, the crew was very active in a couple of neighborhoods. So for us, the firefight is still on. We still have thousands of residents from our community evacuated, but we are turning the corner. I believe we have. We are returning residents to their homes where it's safe to do so. Every single day, there are streets and neighborhoods that are going home. The travel restrictions have been lifted. So these are all positive signs. But that said, there are still a number of people out of their homes. I just came from the RCMP command post where we're meeting and strategizing and doing what we can to get these people homes. And of course, we're still devastated by the loss of homes that we've experienced out there, and are committed to working with all of those people as well.
Jason Brolin, West Kelowna's fire chief. You're listening to and watching BC Today. Thank you for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been meeting with firefighters and officials in the Central Okanagan this afternoon. We'll get more details on his visit and more updates on the wildfires. Right now, it is time for a news update with Stephanie Mercier.
Good afternoon. In the news, as Dan Burritt mentioned, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in the Kelowna area today, thanking firefighters and workers on the front lines who have been battling wildfires. Trudeau saying Canadians have pulled together in difficult and terrifying times, adding now is the time to learn from what we saw this summer to be better prepared to protect ourselves in future years. One of the most popular parks in BC is being shut down until September 30th by 2 local First Nations. Visitors will not have access to Joffrey Lakes Provincial Park during their Indigenous Harvest celebration. BC Park says people with reservations to the park will be refunded. A 10-year-old boy is in hospital with potentially life-threatening injuries after getting hit by 2 vehicles while riding his bike yesterday in Nanaimo. Police say, according to witnesses and dashcam video, it appears the boy was riding down a steep driveway when he suddenly rode into the road. And there are air quality advisories in place for much of the province today, including Metro Vancouver. The regional district says high concentrations of fine particulate matter are expected to last until a change in the weather. And turning to the BC weather, along the north coast, sunny and hazy, a high up to 20. For the Peace region, widespread smoke, a high of 23. For the central interior, sunny and widespread smoke, a high of 18. For the southeast, increasing clouds in the afternoon and hazy, a high of 24. For the southern interior, sunny with local smoke, highs to 26. And along the south coast, a chance of showers or a thunderstorm this afternoon. Widespread smoke otherwise, with highs from 23 near the water up to 28 degrees inland. Now back to BC Today with Dan Burritt.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Stephanie Mercier in our CBC News studio. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming on CBC Gem on our website, cbc.ca, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Great to have you all of you with us today and this week. As we mentioned, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in the Central Okanagan right now. He's meeting with firefighters, elected officials, First Nations leaders, and community volunteers. They've been very busy. The CBC's Brady Strachan is covering his visit, who's also been extremely busy this week, and he joins us now. Brady, thanks for joining us. First of all, how has the Prime Minister's visit been received so far?
Well, Dan, I was here at the West Kelowna, the main fire station here. So that's the area that I saw of his visit. For the most part, he was received well. There was one heckler here that yelled out some disparaging comments, so to say. But apart from that, everybody else here was very receptive of the Prime Minister. And we had a chance to talk to some of them. The wife of a firefighter that came with her young children to thank the Prime Minister for coming and recognizing the hard work that her husband and his colleagues have been doing. I also spoke to a woman who works for Interior Health and seniors care homes. And she says she's been putting in 16-hour days, having to evacuate seniors care homes with vulnerable seniors. They are moving them to another location. And when she found out that the Prime Minister was here, she wanted to come and see him and was thankful for his visit. And of course, he met with officials, as you say, and firefighters, thanking them for the hard work that they put in this past week.
Did the Prime Minister offer any specific, for example, federal supports for communities? We know that some of those have been outlined in general terms, but I think for people who are there and others who are listening and watching, they're wanting to know specifics about what they might be able to receive.
Yeah, Dan, it was pretty general. There wasn't specifics, there wasn't numbers, there wasn't commitments of a certain amount of dollars. Basically saying that we are here to support British Columbians who are facing, the loss of their houses and that. So it will take some time until we find out exactly what the commitments are. Usually there are federal grants that the province will or homeowners will file for disaster recovery if their insurance doesn't cover it. So those, I think, commitments will come in the coming days and weeks. It was more just a general expression that the federal government is with you here and is with communities, and sort of to reiterate the statement that we're all in this together and we all need to support each other at this time. I think that was the general message today.
Did he address at all the tension and the protests that have occurred, particularly in and around the North Shuswap?
There was a question about that, and the question was pointed as why wasn't he there? Why that wasn't on his agenda as he's coming to fire-affected areas. So his answer was that he can't be everywhere all at once, that some of his ministers are following that situation very carefully, but he didn't get into the specifics of the tensions there between fire crews and the RCMP and the people that have stayed behind, and then the protests there that have flared up over the RCMP's presence and the evacuation order. So he didn't dive too specifically into that, I don't want to say conflict, but into that situation.
Issue. Yeah, fair point.
Issue is a good word for that, yes.
There are all sorts of words we could use. What's his itinerary for the rest of the day?
After here, he went to visit a local charity called Mamas for Mamas. It was started here in the Kelowna area as a way for basically mothers to help other mothers in need, and it has been very successful through social media channels and through just direct action of helping a lot of single mothers, a lot of people that need help, and it has expanded to communities across the country. And so he went to meet with volunteers with that organization. That was after his visit here. Before this, he was on West Bank First Nation land, met with Chief Robert Louie and other people there on West Bank First Nation. West Bank First Nation is, people will think of West Kelowna, but a lot of the land here on this side of the bridge is actually West Bank First Nation land. And you see a sign now entering West Bank First Nation, now entering the city of West Kelowna, but it's really kind of a checkerboard of what is each municipality here. And we know that many of the homes lost, when we talk about the West Kelowna area and homes that were lost, many of them, around 20, I think was the last count, were on West Bank First Nation land. So it's people living there were greatly affected by this fire as well.
Lastly, Brady, I asked this of our colleague Jennifer Schrumpke in Kamloops. You've been reporting in and around the Okanagan all week. It has been a grind for a lot of people. People still waiting to find out, some of them, whether or not their homes are still standing. Others know it's not the case. What's the general mood there that you have, that you sense after covering this for so long and so deeply?
Dan, it's crazy for me to think that it was just a week ago when this situation was ramping up, when we were out covering it, when the winds were strong, and we knew there was this fire that was starting to threaten West Kelowna area, and they were saying, look, this could be bad. And it got really bad, as we all know. So there's all sorts of emotions that I've been speaking with people. Exhaustion, obviously, just upset that their home is lost. I spoke to an evacuee yesterday who lost her home, called our newsroom to talk about a very positive story she wanted to share in the news, and it was a positive story that we did cover. She's a culinary arts student, and although her home burned down, when her classmates found out that she had lost her home, they switched gears from doing their final cooking project gala in order to take all their resources to cook food for evacuees and share them with the community. And one of the recipients was their classmate who had just learned in the last days that her home was completely destroyed. And I asked her, well, there must be a real sense of loss, but she iterated just her gratitude that the community has come together, that people are helping out, whether it be her classmates that were helping out in this way, or the emergency support service workers that helped her get into a hotel, to the firefighters. So, I mean, that's just one homeowner, but we're starting to hear those stories as well. The gratitude for the firefighters, that has been here since day one, but people still talk about it. When they talk about the loss and the shock, there's always the fact that this community has really come together to help everyone who's been challenged and affected by it.
CBC's Brady Strachan. Brady, absolutely, and we appreciate all the reporting that you and our colleagues have done up there. Brilliant work. We hope you get a rest as well, along with many others. Thank you for joining us.
Great, and thanks for your hard work on all of this as well, Dan.
Cheers. Brady Strachan joining us live in West Kelowna. Coming up, we're going to hear how you can care for your pets during wildfire season, and we want to hear from you. Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. But first, though, the Central Okanagan Regional District released an update this morning. It says as of 9 a.m., approximately 2,663 properties remain on evacuation order in West Kelowna, 655 in Lake Country, 1,114 in the Regional District of Central Okanagan. Electoral Area and 50 in West Bank First Nation. There are 13,773 properties in total that are still on evacuation alert. Officials warn residents on alert must still be prepared to leave their properties at a moment's notice if those fire conditions change. You can check their website, CORD Emergency, CORD emergency.ca/map, and you can view all existing orders and alerts. And in case of further evacuation province-wide, they suggest you use the BC Evacuation Registration and Assistance website. I'll repeat that again. It is ess.gov.bc.ca. And for help of finding accommodation, there's a phone number. It is 1-800-387-4258. 1-800-387-4258. So, we know experiencing wildfires, extreme heat and smoke, and the stress of being under an evacuation order or alert causes us a lot of stress. These experiences, though, also impact our pets. Have you noticed this with your animals, if you have them? If you've had to evacuate and struggle to keep your pets calm, we'd love to hear from you on how you dealt with it, whether they're livestock, whether they're domesticated animals. Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. If you don't have a pet or just want to talk about your wildfire experience, maybe there's a feeling of relief, whatever you want to chat about, you can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Veterinarian Dr. Lauren Edelman joins us now. Doctor, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Of course, happy to be here.
Now, we know seniors, people with respiratory difficulties, are usually the most vulnerable. Does that translate for pets?
Absolutely. Just like with people, the very young and the very old are going to be the most vulnerable when it comes to, smoke inhalation, wildfire smoke, as well as those with chronic illness. So, just like people with asthma, there are a lot of pets that have asthmatic conditions or heart and lung disease as well.
We know that animals are very intuitive. Their sense of smell gives them all these wonderful powers. They can, in some cases, and maybe this is just past experience from the animals I've had and loved, they can almost smell stress, it seems. They get a sense of it. What impact do evacuations have on pets?
Absolutely. I mean, I think anytime the owner is stressed or worried, a pet is going to be as well. You're, bang on the money. Pets experience stress from their own state, but also they feed off their owners as well. And so that's really, really common in these situations. If you're experiencing stress, your pets are going to be as well.
So how can owners keep their pets calm? Does it have to start with them, or are there techniques that you suggest?
Well, I think the first thing is to be prepared. If, you're in a zone that there's an evacuation order, get everything together ahead of time. Make sure you have enough supplies for your pet for at least a week. If they're on medications, make sure you have a couple of weeks worth of those medications. Get their bed, get their favorite toy, so you're not scrambling at the end. So that's one thing, is to be prepared. Another thing would be, just to give them that enrichment to try and decrease those anxiety levels. So, give them their favorite toy, give them their favorite chew, lots of treats, lots of love. And if you do have a pet that's prone to anxiety, you've probably dealt with this in other situations before. Sometimes medications are actually needed to help manage that anxiety and the stress of that situation.
We heard about an incident with a hiker and their dog a few weeks ago. The dog unable to get back to the trailhead because of heat exhaustion. What advice do you have about monitoring pets' well-being indoors and outdoors?
Yeah, so I think right now, whether you're in an evacuation zone, or whether you're just, looking outside right now, experiencing the secondary effects of the wildfire smoke, there is a lot of smoke outside. And, just like with people, we don't really recommend pets go outside during these really bad air quality days. And so, keeping your pets inside is going to be very, very important. The other thing is that, when there is a stressful environment, when you're trying to evacuate, it's really important to get your pets on a leash, because sometimes the most common thing that happens is everybody's freaked out, the door's open, the pet bolts to try and find safety, and then you don't know where they are. So keeping your pets on a leash before you open up any doors, and with cats especially, a lot of these indoor-outdoor cats, during this time, keeping your cats indoors is highly recommended.
What about other animals, for example, birds, and other pets that people have? Are certain pets more vulnerable to smoke and heat and stress than others?
So birds are probably the most vulnerable. So it's definitely not recommended to let birds have any exposure to the outside. Keeping them inside, ideally using, air purifiers, that type of thing is recommended. A lot of these animals that are low to the ground, smoke affects them more significantly than it would a person, whether that's wildfire smoke or even, cigarette smoke in the home. They're just much closer to these smoke particles. And so it's really important that, we try and keep them inside and not allow them that exposure, because smoke exposure in pets, specifically those in a wildfire situation, can have really detrimental consequences for these pets as well as the people.
Are pets able to regulate how much food and water they need, or is that something that you need to monitor as a pet parent?
I mean, that's a tricky thing. So in general, it depends on the animal. I know if I left out a bunch of food for my dogs, they would eat till they were sick to their stomachs. I've had that happen before. So in these situations where, in some of these evacuation situations, people already have left the house, or they're being forced to leave their house without their pets. So in those situations, we do recommend filling up a bathtub with water so they have access to water, and leaving food out. But obviously those situations can be, quite troublesome, especially if the animals go through the food quite quickly. The good news is, at least, in Kelowna and the other areas, there are a lot of organizations like the BCSPCA, as well as, rescue organizations that are actually going in to areas that have been evacuated. They have the ability to go in and get pets. And, amongst these rescues in the BCSPCA, there's hundreds of animals being boarded for free, and lots of supplies available for families that may have been affected in those situations.
What should owners be sure to include in emergency go-to bags for their pets? Is there like a top 5 list that you suggest people have on hand?
So I definitely would say at least a week's worth of food, as well as 2 weeks of medications. The big thing that people forget often, which I would recommend as long as it's not, an emergency situation, would be medical records. Because sometimes your, pets, you're going to be far away from home. You're going to have to go see a new veterinarian. Luckily nowadays, veterinarians can call each other, but maybe that vet clinic that you typically take Fluffy to is closed. And so, medical records, microchip information, if your dog bolted out of the house and, you're not evacuating with them, knowing what their microchip number is very helpful, so that if they get scanned at a clinic, you'll be able to be reunited with them. And that's the big thing right now is, there's a lot of pets that are out and about, and organizations like the BCSPCA are helping to reunite them with that information.
We're talking about pets and wildfire season. Perhaps if you have animals that you're caring for or had to leave behind, give us a call, 1-800-825-5950. Our number in Metro Vancouver is 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca, or if you'd just like to chat about how you've been affected by the wildfires, maybe pets have been a comfort for you. If you're able to, they're able to take the edge off on some of the stress. Dr. Edelman, how can pet behavior change during experiences of crisis, sort of during and then after?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain things we have to be careful of because there's, to an extent, there's pet behavior, which is going to be affected by, they're going to be stressed out, they're going to be more anxious. That's similar behavior that you might see, with a pet and fireworks, things like that. But there's also behavior that we need to recognize that might actually indicate a medical issue. So, panting is one thing, but if your pet is looking like they're struggling to breathe, if their, mucous membranes are not pink, if they're blue, or they're looking like they're having trouble breathing, that could actually be a sign that the smoke inhalation has affected their lungs. And that would be a reason to go see a veterinarian. Squinting, a lot of eye tearing, things like that, that can also indicate that maybe there's some burns happening from the smoke on their eyes. So you definitely have to be careful, what you're attributing just to anxiety versus what you're attributing to potential negative effects from the smoke itself.
And Doctor, we have an email from Dan who says he's in Monty Lake. He says many cats went missing when people returned home after being evacuated during the White Rock Lake fire 2 years ago, and that was a brutal one. Please tell people to keep their cats inside as long as they can after returning home. Not sure why it was mostly cats going missing. This was in both burned out neighborhoods and ones that survived. Any particular reason, perhaps, why the cats would have behaved that way, Doctor?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this, if you have an indoor only cat, hopefully your cat's going to be staying inside with you or evacuating with you.
Right.
A lot of cats, especially in more rural areas, are indoor outdoor. And so when fires happen, they can get lost or they can try and leave areas that are dangerous to them. And so cats are one of the main species that we see affected during wildfire season. It's really, really common to see them presenting with burns, particularly to their paw pads, ears, face, as well as respiratory issues as well, damage to their lungs, often needing oxygen therapy. And so these cats, their instinct is to find safety. And so oftentimes they're not, if they're indoor outdoor cats, they're going to be fleeing, and then they may end up somewhere very far from home and not be able to get back with severe injuries. And so treating these cats, their burn injuries, particularly to their paws, can be very time consuming. It can take several weeks, if not months, for them to heal, requiring like monthly bandage changes, things like that. So it's really, really important if you do have a cat and you're in an at-risk area, it's a great idea to keep them inside.
Margaret is calling us from Gabriola Island. Margaret, thanks for joining us. What have you been up to?
I was just calling to alert people that the Provincial Emergency Social Services does have an animal section. Mm-hmm. We have one on Gabriola. We can, in the emergency, make a emergency pet shelter, but it's getting volunteers. It's pretty impossible. Mm-hmm. And we have crates, we have equipment to carry, and we're all well over retirement age, ladies. So we'd like some help. People say they'll help, but they never appear.
Margaret, we appreciate your call. What's the website, or where, if they want to get involved, somebody listening on Gabriola Island or elsewhere, how can they get involved with you?
Oh dear. Emergency Social Services.
Oh, you mean through the province?
Well, support services.
Gotcha. Okay.
On Gabriola.
Yeah.
And we have all our equipment at the fire hall, and we also do pet first aid.
Really?
Oh yes.
Wow.
A couple of times a year, so
yeah,
that's hilarious.
And Margaret, if I can ask you to make a pitch on this, how rewarding is it to be involved?
Very, especially if you've got an animal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have an animal?
I'm between dogs.
Oh, I see. Lovely.
Well, yes, I have dogs.
Oh,
I will do.
Yeah. Wonderful,
We're
Margaret.
all pet owners.
Yes. Margaret, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it. Thank you for volunteering. And if anybody wants to get involved, the website again is ess.gov.bc.ca. Dr. Edelman, I saw you nodding along there. Obviously, it's they need volunteers to care for all the critters, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the volunteers right now, specifically, through the BC SPCA, are working overtime in Kelowna and those surrounding areas. So if you want more information on that as well, definitely go to the BC SPCA website. Right now, too, it's really important that we make sure that they get the supplies that they need. Obviously, it's easy to come, bring a bunch of supplies and donate them, but make sure you check the website to see what they actually need right now. Maybe it's carriers, maybe it's food, but there are a lot of animals right now that are being cared for that the BC SPCA is boarding for free while their owners are displaced. So volunteering, helping with supplies, helping raise money. There's a donation link on the BC SPCA website. If you want to help, but you can't physically help yourself because you're working, a monetary donation is always going to be beneficial as well.
Just wrapping up, Dr. Edelman, and we really appreciate your time. Give us a sense of how busy you've been in and amongst this wildfire season, and do you expect that to ramp up?
Yeah, so being in Vancouver right now, obviously it's not, as busy here as some of the areas that are going to be surrounding, but a lot of these animals are being brought into Vancouver from the Kelowna area as well. Anytime there's wildfires, the surrounding veterinary clinics are going to be super busy with pets that have smoke inhalation or burns, so thermal injuries. So it's really important that, they're prepared and that these 24-hour ERs, just be patient with them. Our industry is already experiencing a shortage. And when there are these massive wildfires, we always have to triage and prioritize the animals that need, help the most.
Yeah. Dr. Lauren Edelman, we really appreciate your time and your expertise and your perspective. Thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
And if people want to get involved, you can go onto the BC SPCA website. That is spca.bc.ca. That is it for our show today and this incredible, long, and difficult week for many people in this province. First, thank you for your calls and your emails and your comments and your questions. It is hugely appreciated. An amazing team has kept these shows going. I'm going to read some names, and hopefully I don't forget anybody. Miriam Gamar, Alan Regan, Melody Jacobson, Charlie Cho, Gurpreet Cambo, Mark Fairfield, Greg Kisser, Anna Park, Eric Pankratz, Michelle Morton, Tim Weeks, Renee Lucas, Darius Madavi, Justin McElroy, Belle Puri, and all of our other reporters and producers and camera people in the field and in our newsrooms. Brilliant work, everyone. And again, if I forgot you, please forgive me. You can give me a smack in the newsroom. You can always email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Listen on the CBC Listen app and on CBC Vancouver's YouTube page. I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott. She's back on Monday. Chat then.